major Russia attacks on Ukraine, significant attacks, mainly located in Kiev, although we've seen strikes in Kharkov and various other areas too. We're going to break that down, the extent of the attack, the level of the attack, and in addition to that, what is happening? What's the reason for such a large attack? What was the in response to? We've got Russia expert Jim Kavanagh on the show. Jim, thanks so much for taking your time out to join us. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sulaiman.
Thanks for coming on. So, Jim, I mean, obviously we'll give an overview of the strikes, but what's your thoughts about these major strikes?
Well, we don't know all about it yet. This is happening as we speak, I think. And look, Russia has been preparing for this for weeks. We know that. They've been withholding, let's put it that way. They've been having minor strikes, relatively minor strikes against Ukraine for the past few weeks. I think it's been about 3 weeks or months that they had a really large strike. So they've amassed thousands of drones and hundreds of missiles. American intelligence apparently made an advisory to Ukraine yesterday that Russia was about to hit them very hard and to hit them with new weapons, which I presume means some version of new version of the Orezhnik. So what's happening now may be that huge strike. Looks like it is, and I'm not surprised it's concentrated on Kiev. I think Russia is going to go after Kiev now very strongly. I think they're fed up with it, and they want to. I think they also have. They've been developing an analog system, their own version of Starlink. Ukrainians have done very well using Starlink system, and the Russians for a long time, or for some time at least, were able to hijack the Starlink system for themselves. So they were doing very well with the Starlink system. And then Musk reprogrammed it so the Russians couldn't do it. But the Russians have put new satellites into orbit and have been talking about establishing their version of Starlink. And I think that may be these repeater towers that Zelensky's complaining about in Belarus might be part of that. I think they now feel that they have the capability of being very effective with their drones, and I think they're going to hit Kiev. I'm not surprised to see. Look, they're getting very close to Sumy in the north. That's on the road to Kiev. I heard today someone saying that they had heard from sources in Russia that Putin has told his generals to open a new front coming from the north, from the Bryansk region, which is all aimed directly at Kiev. And in the same time, they're advancing steadily, absolutely, in Donbass and Zaporozhye region. So, we're going to see. We're going to see what they do, what damage is done in Kiev here, what buildings are hit, what weapons are used. I don't have the information on that now, but I think Russia is committed now to trying to put an end to this war, not at least to get into a situation where they have conquered the Donbass, at least put Zaporozhye under siege and threatening Kiev. I think they want to be threatening Kiev at this point, and they're going to try and force the Ukrainian army to to pull forces out of the Donbass and out of Zaporozhye to defend Kiev. We shall see.
So I just want to go through some of the strikes just as a recap. We did give it in the last show while it was happening. There's still strikes happening right now as well. Initially, many thought this was the end of the strikes, but the strikes are continuing. And we can see, for example, 2 impacts right now in northwestern Kiev. 2 failed interception attempts were made by Patriots. We have new Iskander-Ks in Sumy Oblast, flying west on the same course. We also have number of missiles that have hit Kiev. We also saw Iskander-Ms, I mentioned that earlier. We also had KH-101s flying past the Kiev Oblast and various other places. You had the Geran 2 and 3 drones as well. So major strikes happening throughout Kiev. You talked about Kiev being hit. We've seen major fires in Kiev. We've seen the presidential palace being hit. and surface to air missiles being used. We've got impacts in the east of Kiev as well, such as in Bavaria. Huge number. They say that in the up until this show, and since then there's been 4 or 5 more, there was at least 70 missiles used or struck towards Kiev. We've just got some visuals coming out as well, Jim, of those. But just before I go to the visuals, what's your thoughts about the breadth and depth of the strikes right now? It is probably one of the most significant attacks we've seen on Kiev for a very long time, if not throughout this war.
Look, if they had 70 missiles on Kiev, that's a big number, plus all the drones. We don't know how many, but there's going to be a lot. And I think that the Ukrainian air defense system is not capable of dealing with this now. The Russians are confident they're going to get through. KH-101s, Iskander. We haven't heard anything yet about Orezhnik, but I would expect that we'll hear something about that. You say that the presidential palace has been hit. I didn't hear that.
No, sorry, it's not the it's the hotel. What's it called again?
Oh,
is it presidential place or something? Let me get the information here. So here's just the video that came out now. Huge fire in, well, how do you pronounce this? Bosha, I spelled it wrong as well. But Bosha Kugova. And you have that. You can see here, major fire there. You also have, obviously, Kiev being hit quite hard. Here was Russian bombers. We also had confirmation that there was Russian bombers over Kiev. Cruise
missiles.
That's
significant.
Yeah, cruise missile launched by the Russian strategic bombers. Bombers enter Ukrainian airspace, approaching Kiev. Obviously, we saw more hits on Kiev. Multiple continuous ballistic missiles. At that point, which was about an hour or so ago, there was 30 Iskander and Zircons that hit Kiev within a short space of 30 minutes. And sorry, it was the Premier Palace, which is the hotel that was hit as well. You can see the visuals of that. That was the Premier Palace.
Well, I presume that hotel was housing soldiers and officers. I don't know. I'd be surprised if it was just a residential hotel. But this is serious. And, it's what can Kiev do about it? They don't have obviously they don't have the air defenses that can stop this. And if Russia is flying bombers over the city, probably they didn't fly them over this. They probably stood off and launched, missiles bombs that can glide bombs or powered bombs that can, JSON type bombs that can hit the targets from a standoff position. But they are hitting central Kiev. And we want to see what happens on the famous Bankova Street where the government offices are. That's going to be an important point. And also, I'm sure even though the government offices are on Bankova Street, I'm sure there are bunkers around the city that are not right where the offices are publicly located, and I'm sure the Russians know where they are. So we're going to have to see what the damage is. And as you say, this is still going on. I mean, so it's going to be morning in Kiev. Will it stop? I don't know. Will the Russians do it another day? We'll have to see. This is a turning point in the war, in the Russian and Putin's attitude toward the war. They're not interested in negotiations anymore. They know this is going to be won on the battlefield. They know that nothing they do is going to stop the Europeans and Americans who are still involved in this, but certainly the Europeans, from supporting Zelensky as much as they can. And they just have to put it down. And it's a very difficult thing now. Again, I'm sure that Putin is convinced this is no longer possible to conceive that you're going to make some deal with Zelensky. At the end of the day, Russia is going to they're on a war of regime change in Ukraine. And I said that at the very beginning, they're going to have to do that, whether they want to or not, because the Ukrainian forces are, whether Zelensky's there or not, you have fascist forces that are never going to give up. And that has to be, for the past 10 years, 12 years, since 2014, there's been an ascendance of fascist ideology in Ukraine. And the hero of the father of the nation, Bandera, they just reinterred one of the most vicious fascist leaders with honors. And Russia won't be safe as long as a regime is in place like that can be used by the Europeans and the Americans and NATO to to try to destabilize Russia, which is what this was all about at the beginning. This has been this was a war from the West to destabilize Russia and to try and do regime change in Russia and get rid of Putin and turn Russia into divide Russia and turn it into a series of oligarchic run potentates, etc. So this is what Russia has to put an end to it. They know we got to get to the root causes of this, and the root causes of this, we have to make it clear that no, there is no possibility for NATO, the West, the United States, Europe, whoever, to come into Kiev and use a regime there to hassle us and to create problems for us. We got to put an end to that. So I'm not, don't think this is over, because I don't know what the United States will do in this circuit. It's really the United States that's going to have to decide whether it's going to give up or not. And I wouldn't count on them actually thinking that they're going to give up.
So on that, obviously, guys, we'll continue to give you the news as and when we receive it. We can't see any more strikes at this moment, but we are seeing the older strikes of the attacks on Kiev, but they are happening at this moment in time. I just wanted to show you this, Jim. This was a post by Ethan. Obviously, we like Ethan a lot on the show. And he wrote, after Russia breaks the fortress belt, there is almost zero Ukrainian defense left. I feel this is seriously underreported in the media, and this could happen this year. No wonder Ukraine is striking into Russia to try and force peace. What's your thoughts about this? What's your thoughts about the fortress belt and how you easily then go into Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia?
Yeah, look, there's a town, I don't know the name, but it's a relatively small town in the Donbass area that Russia is now taking control of, okay? And if they've taken control of Liman and not Kramatorsk, the other K city, which they probably have, and they take control of this town, and Putin has said, it's a D, it's a town that begins with a D. Putin has said that beyond that town, there's no strong defense lines for Ukraine. Ukraine built up huge defenses in Donbass. That's what they did. That's where the war was before the Russian war was. That's where the war was from 2015 to 2022. And Ukraine built up massive defenses in there. And that's the hardest thing for Russia to get through. And once they get through that, they will, there's not much between them and the Dnieper and Kiev. So that's what Ukraine is afraid of. But Russia has enough manpower and enough forces and enough drones and enough missiles to launch attacks a lot of places at once. And they are opening up avenues to Kharkiv. And they are opening up a front. They have opened up, and they're almost at Sumy. And they are now taking towns to the north, to the west and northwest of Kramatorsk. So they're creating a cauldron around Kramatorsk. And these are, and Syrskyi himself has said this, Zelensky has been, head in the sand, Pollyanna about we have no problem. We've taken the initiative, and the Western press has been completely delusional about this. Oh yeah, Ukraine is striking with drones. They've retaken the initiative. No, I mean, in the important areas, in the Donbass and in Zaporozhye and in Kharkiv and in Sumy and other areas in the north, Russians are moving forward relentlessly, and they're going to get past this point. I mean, Zaporozhye and Kramatorsk, Kramatorsk and Slavyansk are going to be a big problem, but the Russians are going to end up surrounding them and cutting them off from logistics. And same thing with Zaporozhye. I'm convinced that Putin is wanting to take over Donbass before the end of the year. And once they do that, then you're in this situation where Russia has taken everything that it wanted before it started the special military operation. And I don't know what they're going to do. And Kiev is going to be under threat. I mean, I do think we should look for new offensives coming from the north, from Sumy and from the other area south of Bryansk that the Russians are talking about coming into. And, this is relentless. And Syrskyi himself says, we don't have the manpower. We don't have the missiles. We don't have the air defenses. He's setting himself up because apparently Zelensky told the American, I forget which American senator or congressman came. He said, we're going to get rid of, I'm going to fire Zirsky and I'll put Budanov in charge. Budanov is, the special operations, the Ukrainian intelligence guy who's the assassination squad guy. So Zirsky sees handwriting on the wall for him, and he wants to be saying things that, he doesn't want to, he wants to put things out to demonstrate that he knew what the real story was. So, this is next 6 months are going to be really the deciding battle of Ukraine.
We shall see. We shall see. In terms of, you mentioned about Kiev, would they go to Kiev? Because obviously that's not a strategic decision to make. It's more a decision to make in order to essentially get to Zelensky and the leadership, right?
Well, they're going to threaten Kiev. If they take Sumy, they're threatening Kiev. Okay, they're going to have a situation where they're seen to be on the verge of attacking Kiev. Let's put it that way. And they are going to attack it by air with air assets. So with their missiles and their drones and their bombs, and combine that with the victories, if they get them in Donbass, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the Kiev regime. And there's going to be, but again, the real problem here is going to put a lot of pressure on the Western backers of this war, and who they are, and who, especially in the United States, is willing to sit back and watch the whole thing go down. And Russia take Ukraine back into its orbit. Point. That's what Russia has to do now. And who can stop that from happening? The Europeans can't stop that from happening. They will do what they can. They'll pour whatever money and weapons they can into Ukraine, but that's not going to work. At some point, the Americans have to either step in or give up, or just clearly give up. And they haven't given up yet. They're not as interested in it. They have other fish to fry as far as they're concerned. Israel and Iran is much more important, but it's going to be hard for them to give up. This is a huge thing. This is the most, that Russia becomes an impenetrable country. Then it's unquestionably a superpower, and it has the Eurasian landmass under its control. So, it's going to be very hard for the neocon Washington establishment, national security establishment, to just give that up. But there's nothing they can do except a fight that they're going to lose anyway. This is the problem that the Americans have. But everybody's a little crazy in this situation.
No doubt. Another thing that happened was what's his name again? Putin had a meeting with the leader of Belarus. And he said to him that meeting was apparently because Zelensky had threatened Belarus. Now, Belarus has always been more pro-Russia. But that being said, what's your thoughts about that threat? And how do you think Belarus is going to deal with this issue? Do you think they become a lot more overt?
Well, Belarus is very close to Russia. Belarus is an ally of Russia, very, very close ally of Russia. Belarus doesn't have a big military. I don't know, 50, 80,000 people in its military. Zelensky made a threat to Belarus because Zelensky said there's this line of towers in Belarusian territory to the north of Ukraine that are being used by the Russians to guide their radio towers, or some kind of guiding towers that are guiding Russian drone attacks in Ukraine. And Zelensky said 10 days ago to Lukashenko, you got to get rid of those towers or we're going to attack you. Now, it was a bluff. He wasn't going to do that. He can't open another front in Belarus, but he might have done something, some kind of drone attack or whatever. But then he came back after 7 days and said, we don't have to attack him anymore because they turned off the towers. And people in Ukraine and military people in Ukraine said, no, they didn't turn off the towers. They didn't turn off the towers. Whatever those towers were doing, they're still doing. And Zelensky has no ability really to open a front against Belarus. It's not going to do any good. And Belarus is saying, Lukashenko is saying, we don't want to attack Iran. We're not in this war. We're not in this war. But, don't screw around with us or we'll be in the war. Now, Belarus, if it's true, and it may very well be true that these towers are instruments the Russians are using for their drone warfare, and Belarus is helping the Russians in the war. He is, just like Poland is helping Ukraine and Romania is helping Ukraine and et cetera. And but I don't think there's going to be a explicitly open war front in Belarus. And Zelensky demonstrated again that he talks big, but he's bluffing. He doesn't have the material or the personnel or the manpower to go into Belarus by any means. He has to try and defend the territory that he's losing, and he doesn't have enough manpower or material to do that. So this is his problem, and he's the whole Ukrainian drone offensive, which had real effects, and especially in Crimea, but it's petering out now. Is all this stuff was to gin up the publicity in the West that Ukraine is taking the offensive again. They're turning the corner. They have the initiative. He needs to keep that line available to the West. Keep that line of propaganda that we're taking the offensive again. We're not being defeated. You got to give us some more money. You just got to help us a little bit more. That's all he's doing, and all he's going to be doing until he's deposed, which at some point, I don't know how that's going to happen, but at some point, the Western something will happen that the Western countries cannot deny anymore, that Ukraine is losing this, and it's going to lose it, and there's nothing we can do to keep that from happening. Those are the kinds of advances we have to see happening in Donbass and in Kharkiv and in Sumy and in Zaporozhye region, to the point where it becomes unavoidable and undeniable to the Western supporters of Ukraine that Ukraine is lost unless we do something really radical.
So in terms of, we talked about Belarus. Now in Europe, there's been a number of pro-Russia candidates who kind of lost the election. People like Viktor Orban of Hungary, Simeon of Romania, Dodon of Moldova. What's your thoughts about these kind of, in Europe, that even the allies of Russia are starting to lose their elections?
Well, they're screwing around with the elections. We're in a situation now throughout the world, Europe, Latin America, the United States, where we're seeing it's impossible not to think that there might be a lot of messing around with the elections, interference, not only huge amounts of money pouring in, but funny ballots, funny totals, tens of thousands of absentee ballots coming in at the right time. Look, in Romania, they ruled the guy out of the race for no reason. And it was shown, they demonstrated that the charges that were against the guy, that he was using some kind of Russian interference, were not true, but he still couldn't run. So, we're watching at all kinds of levels in the Western world, the absolute contempt and for what were considered fair rules of fair play, rights from freedom of speech, from speech rights and rights to protest, to how you run an election fairly and in a way that's transparent, that everybody can be confident in. And that's not the case. They're going to try and rule people out of, in Germany and France, what they did in France. When they lost Macron lost the election, but he says, I'm going to stay in control. So this is a serious problem. They are not interested in electoral democracies as much as they are interested in maintaining certain standards and certain structures that they think are important. And one of those is not allowing Russia to win. There are others, certainly, but that's been a very important thing. And so I don't know that the populations of even Poland, Czech Republic, these are whether they really are dying to go along with a war against Russia. You've got the leaders of Germany and the Baltic states saying we have to prepare for a war against Russia. I don't think the people of those countries want that. I really don't. I'm sure of that. I'm sure the polls say not. So, you've got to, but what you're pointing to is something which is going to become more obvious to people. To what extent can you trust the elections? To what extent are electoral standards being manipulated to make sure that parties and positions that are very popular in the country cannot win electorally? And that's happening, and it's going to happen more often.
Okay, and so we obviously the strikes are continuing right now towards Ukraine. We have it says Iskander Zircon threats from Crimea as well. We'll obviously continue to give you that news as and when we receive it. Now, the other element of this is Ukraine. Many are arguing that you've mentioned it. Many people are posting about it, how the Russians are just very much moving into Ukrainian territory and taking a large amount of Ukrainian territory. From Ukraine's perspective, they've escalated their strikes on Russia as well, on key energy infrastructure. Do you think those strikes are based on desperation, or what do you think is going on there?
Well, the Ukraine strikes on Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're designed to create the story that Ukraine is turning the corner, that Ukraine is taking the initiative, that they're capable of hurting Russia in a serious way. And, they have hurt Russia, but not in a serious way, not in a way that's going to change the course of the war in any serious way. And they've done damage, especially in Crimea. But the Russians have been able to recover from it, and get their oil production facilities working again. And Ukraine doesn't have the resources to keep this going. Well, that's what Zelensky wants. He wants the European countries to give him the resources to keep this going. And what they can do is delay the end of the war. What they can do is get Russia madder. And that's what they've done. Look, it's very significant that, for a year and a half, Russians were saying we made a deal with the Americans in Anchorage and we thought we had an understanding there, blah, blah, blah. And now Trump came out and said, no, and Rubio, we didn't make a deal. There was no deal made. And Putin has said, okay, that's right. There was no deal made. So what he's saying there is we are under, because Russia had said we had made certain concessions, never explained what they were. But now Putin is saying, okay, yeah, you're right. We didn't really make a deal. We just chit-chatted and came to some kind of vague agreement, but there was no real deal made. So we're not bound by this. So, any idea, I think the idea was that the Russians would say if they got Donbass, they would have a ceasefire in Zaporozhye and Kherson. But now they're saying, no, there's no deal. Just, you're right. There was no deal. So if there is ever going to be a deal, it's going to start over again. And it's going to start over from the point where we already control Donbass. And so, we're not going to give up something that we don't need to give up. So it's, I think, again, the Russians have demonstrated and have said and articulated, we don't recognize that we got anything from the negotiating with the Americans. We're not really interested in negotiating with the Americans. We're certainly not interested in negotiating with the Europeans or with Zelensky. So, we're going to let this play out on the battlefield. We're confident that we're going to win this, and we are winning it. Not in lightning strikes, but in relentless advances that are going to eventually punch through the last line of the defense in the Donbass. And that's the situation. Zelensky wants to do something, anything that keeps the Western press able to say, oh, look at this. Ukraine is now turning the corner. If only we give them a little bit more. They're turning the corner. The Russians are on the back foot all of a sudden. It's not the case. There's a war that Ukraine is capable of and has hit Russia in certain places and damaged certain facilities. But Russia's too big. You damage 5-10 oil production facilities in Russia, It's not nothing, but it's not going to change the course of the war. You damage 5-10 oil facilities in Western Ukraine, you got a problem. So, and Zelensky has been, and the Western press has gone along with it. The Russians are losing 30,000 men a month. They can't replace them. And Syrskyi himself, again, comes up and says, no, the Russian army is growing in Ukraine. There's 750,000 people, I think Syrskyi put there. And they're not losing men beyond the replacement. The replacement possibility, they're more than replacing the men that they're losing. And we're not. So this is the fundamental problem that Ukraine has, that Zelensky does not want the West to pay attention to. He wants them to pay attention to, look, there's a big fire in this oil refinery where our drone hit it. So, that's what's going to happen. And it's going to happen until they can't get away with it anymore, until the Western press and the Western politicians have to say, look, we recognize and we can't deny that Russia is winning and is going to win, unless we do something else, which who knows what, I don't know what else they can do.
Fair enough. And then just one other section I want to talk about was Iran. What's your thoughts about what's happening with the MOU and the Iran deal? I know your view has always been that it's not going to be solved, but what's your thoughts now? We've got a deal. We've got a deal, Jim. It's over.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, the war's over. Yeah. Oh my God. Look, I can't see how anybody can deny this is. The Trump administration has no interest in keeping this deal. They want the Strait of Hormuz open. That's all they want. They're going to try and get that done as much as possible. J.D. Vance just yesterday said, well, yeah, we're going to, while the Strait of Hormuz is open, we're going to get the Strait of Hormuz open so we can refill our gas supplies or materials, or essential materials, and then we'll see what happens. So the Americans are getting ready. And this is Minsk 3, Minsk, Middle East Minsk. And I think, and I hope the Iranian, I know a lot of people in Iran understand this and know it. And this is a huge problem. And I just want to resist this idea, Iran has beaten the United States. Iran fought off the United States and Israel and has beaten them, has won the battle so far. But this is a battle in a long war. And, the Americans and the Israelis are going to find ways to maintain the pressure on Iran, okay? Has Iran gotten its money back? Has Israel moved an inch back from Lebanon? Are they going to move an inch back from Lebanon? Look at this deal that they just made with the Lebanese government. It's absolutely incredible. You have to realize everybody thinks, and it's true in a very important sense, the longer Iran stays intact and is not defeated, it's won. But that's true on the other side too. As long as Israel and the United States and the Israeli operation are not defeated, they haven't lost yet either. And they come back. Look what happened in Syria. They had the Russian army there. And it took, after how many years, they came back and they made sure they won. And Syria's gone. So, and you have a situation. And so look at what happened in Gaza. Oh, Hamas is going to put up a good fight. It's all bad for the Israelis in the long run, in the kind of absolutely the case that Israel has lost the most important asset it has. It's losing the most important asset it has, which is American support. But it's lost that among the populace, but it hasn't lost it among the political class. They're going to pass these laws that integrate Israeli and American defense and intelligence forces. It's just incredible. This is unbelievable. So, you have 2 or 3 democratic socialists who are anti-Zionist. Good. That's a really important thing. The number of anti-Zionist or even Zionist critical politicians in the Congress has gone from 3 to maybe 15, but that they still a lot more absolutely committed Zionists who are running. AIPAC just put out a self-congratulatory things about how many candidates they supported who won. So the American political regime is still completely committed to Zionism. They are committed. That is because Israel wants to undermine Iran. They want to do what they did in Libya, do what they did in Syria. Look at Iraq. Iraq is controlled by the United States. The Americans and the Israelis didn't lose the Iraq war. They won it. Iraq is controlled by the United States. Every dollar of Iraqi oil income goes to the treasury of the United States, and they decide what to do with it. So, this is, if you look at the ostensible reasons for the war. Oh, they didn't get what they wanted. They lost. They didn't lose. They what the real reason for that war was to get Iraq out of the business of the anti-Zionist resistance, and they did. And they got Iraq now is essentially a protectorate of the United States, and they can't act as an independent country. That's the kind of thing they want to do in Iran. It's going to be very difficult to do. I think the Iranians have been, but they have to act, and at some point they may have to decide whether to act preemptively, proactively, not wait. They're still waiting. Okay, we're not being attacked. That's a good thing. No, is it a good thing? You're not being attacked, but look what's happening here, there, and everywhere. In order to get to the root cause of this and get rid of the root cause of it, to make us have a situation in which you know that your country won't ever be attacked again, something else has to happen. And it's a very, very difficult thing. They have to choose whether they're going to attack, essentially. And as, Larry John, really, from the Iranian point of view, the best thing that can happen is that there's a real big attack against them. Then they have to fight it out, and they probably can overcome. But I'm really worried. This process, interminable negotiation process, is another peace process that they're going to go through. Another peace process where, we have these negotiations and we have little tit for tat strikes. Meanwhile, we're building up our reserves. We're making sure that we won't be, if we attack again, we can get through 2 or 3 months without the Strait of Hormuz open. And we're going to put pressure from the east. They're going to, there was this whole thing about, I saw this again this week, about gathering together, 100,000 Kurds and Uyghurs and fighters in the east of Iran and opening a front. They're not going to win that way, but they open a front in the east of Iran with 50,000 American troops there backing them up. And then the Iranians have to fight on that front. So what the Israeli and the American imperialist operation knows how to do is to keep the pressure on. And that's what they're going to do. And Iran can't be just in a situation where it's saying, we haven't lost yet, so we've won. They have to find a way of creating a situation where they get the pressure off for once and for all.
So just on what you said, because I think it's really important, and something I actually forgot to mention in the various interviews that I've spoken, so I'm so glad you mentioned it, so we can talk about it on here, because I never managed to talk about it with my previous guests, but because you mentioned it, you kind of reminded me that this was news, but I forgot about it. So it was reported, and it lines up with what you just said now, that there was some engagement, and I'm just trying to find the exact thing that I tweeted out, but maybe I won't find it. But basically the crux of it was this, that there was engagement in Azerbaijan province by the IRGC and Kurd fighters. And also I've read during the interview, so I didn't read it in detail, but I had glimpsed on it, that apparently there's a large movement of IRGC forces to different areas, almost getting ready for some kind of ground incursion. What's your thoughts about this?
Yeah, well, that's if they can do it, it's a smart move by the Israelis. Set up a front in the east where you have 10, 20, 30,000, of their jihadis or Kurdish or whatever.
So this was it. Clashes.
Syria.
So this was it. I just found it. Clashes between an armed Kurdish group and the IRGC in Piran Shahar in Iran's western Azerbaijan province, which has a large Kurdish, Iranian Kurdish population. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Do continue.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing, as I say, give them enough time. They have the money. They have the resources. They will gin up, divisive, nationalist, ethnic, whatever, religious divisions. And they'll, you have a force of 10,000, 20,000 people. It's not going to overthrow the Iranian government, but it's going to create a problem that they have to deal with. Look what happened in Syria. That's what they did, and if you have these other Azerbaijani government cooperating with them, then you've got a problem. And so you can't, how can you put an end to that as long as the Americans and Israelis themselves have not been defeated? The Israelis have to be defeated. So I'm not feeling happy about the situation at all. Israel controls 60%, going to 70% of Gaza. They control 20% of Lebanon. The Lebanese are never getting back there. The villages have been, see these explode. They blew up one of the largest single warhead explosions in the world. They're blowing up villages. People don't have villages to come back to. And are they going to be driven out by Hezbollah? They're only going to be driven out by Hezbollah if Iran actually commits itself to a real serious war in Lebanon against the IDF. And if the Lebanese armed forces now fight on behalf of Israel, I mean, this is a very bad situation. And, nothing here, nobody's won anything yet. Everybody understands that the trap that the United States is in for itself is bad. And Iran has demonstrated that you don't have to be that afraid of the United States. But it ain't over till it's over, and it's long from over. And look at the history of this over the past 20 years in the Middle East, countries like Libya, Syria, Iraq. Syria, Libya, Iraq, the Israelis won those wars. They won them. They destroyed those countries. They took them off the table as threats to Israel, as parts of the anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist resistance. And they did it over a long period. They did it with pressure of all kinds, economic and military pressure and of all kinds. So that's what, now is it the same situation? Again, Iran is going to have to decide whether it's going to fight. Other Iranian allies, you talked about Pakistan. I saw you with Larry Johnson say, oh, Pakistan said if Israel nukes Iran, we're going to nuke Israel. Oh, really? Yeah, I agree with you. Are they really going to do that? Who is? This is a fundamental problem. Israel can nuke not only Iran, they can nuke anybody they want. They have missile-carrying submarines that the Germans gave. Everybody knows this. Everybody's still talking about 200 Israeli nuclear weapons. That was in 1989. Vanunu said they had 200 nuclear weapons. They have how many nuclear weapons now? And they can deliver them probably anywhere in the world. The point is any country in the world that comes to the defense of Iran, if it's nuked, is going to have to be afraid we might get nuked too. And Israel is saying that, and they mean it. So what country in the world is willing to take that chance on behalf of Iran? What country in the world has been willing to take that chance or even anything like that chance on behalf of the Palestinians? None, except Iran and Yemen. But this is the problem. On the other side, you have the Americans who will do anything on behalf of Israel, to save Israel. On the other side, you have Iran, you have Yemen, who have been doing things, at least things, serious things on behalf of the Palestinians and on behalf of Hezbollah and Lebanon. But there's a point at which they're going to have to decide, are we going to go any further in pursuing our aims to get rid of the threat, which is the Zionist threat to the Middle East. And it's a very difficult situation.
So, Jim, just some more news, because this is where I did check up, because you talked about the ground invasion. I feel like many people have probably missed this news, and I think it's really important. So let me just read to you what's happening right now. This is huge. In my view, it does seem like something is happening on the ground. So let me read this to you. This is from a number of sources. This is from an OSINT account as well. It says the IRGC is deploying heavy armored and artillery units to the mountain areas of East Kurdistan. That's the first thing. Also, a large number of IRGC ground forces have been mobilized in Sardasht and the surrounding mountainous areas. And remember, the reason these moves are probably happening, and I'm going to continue with this, is because this is the funeral of Ayatollah Khamenei. So a lot of people are going to be redirected towards the funeral, worried and concerned that they need to protect the people where the funeral is happening, worried about, there's going to be 20 or 30 million people allegedly coming. How many of them are going to be Mossad agents? How many of them are going to be American CIA agents? How many of them are going to be MI6, MI5? These are very important things. And so they've got all of that to worry about. And so let me continue. Sorry with that. A large number of IRGC ground forces have been mobilized in Sardasht and the surrounding mountainous areas. They have established checkpoints and ambush points in the Kapran area between Sardasht and Beirun near the border, while deploying artillery, tanks, heavy machine guns, and other military equipment. Also, additional forces have been deployed near Rabat, where the area has also been heavily militarized. Meanwhile, another convoy of IRGC forces traveled from Sardasht towards Meravi, reaching the Nelas area. I will make sure in the next show, guys, that I have a map of all this so you can see what's happening. And then I mentioned, and this is just elaborates on what I said, clashes have erupted. This is about 20, 30 minutes ago. Clashes, maybe 40 minutes ago. Clashes have erupted in between the IRGC and fighters from the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, the PDKI, in residential areas of Perenshar in Iran's western Azerbaijan province. Several PDKI fighters have been killed. So we're already starting to see something's happening, something's brewing. It could be, it could be something that may not, but I think there's something going on there. There's something happening. What's your thoughts? So you've covered a lot of these ground incursions in Syria and various other places. I do think that something's going on here. I think it could just be nothing, but I don't think it's nothing. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's not going to overthrow the Iranian government, but it's going to create a problem they're going to have to deal with. And look, if it's coming from Azerbaijan,
no, West Azerbaijan province, which is in Iran.
Yeah, but does it border? What country does it border? Is it interior of the country?
Borders Iraq.
Iraq. Well, yeah. Well, look, the Iraqi.
Well, you have to come a bit in. Sorry, you have to come a bit in before you get to West Azerbaijan province. I'll get the map up, but yeah.
Yeah, the Iraqi militia have to try and become part of this fight. You know, it's sure. So I'm just saying, this is the kind of thing that the Americans and Israelis are good at doing, and they will gin something up, and they will give them support. And it's like the Americans can sit back and say, "We're not attacking you. It's these poor Kurdistani freedom fighters that are attacking you," and they will give those Kurdistani freedom fighters, weapons that are significant. They'll be able to do some damage with them, and they may even give them some kind of, if they're close enough to a border that they can, from Iraq, they could look. The Israelis had a military base in Iraq. They could put rocket fire from Iraq or from Azerbaijan if they come from Azerbaijan. So this is the kind of pressure that they are not. The Americans and the Israelis aren't sitting back saying, "Oh my God, the Iranians beat us. What are we going to do?" They're sitting back saying, "Okay, let's get the Iranians involved in chat for another 10 years, another 5 years, another 6 months, another year. We'll have a peace process, and we'll be talking about that, and we'll be making all these."
So I've got the map here.
At the same time, we'll set up these pressure points that are coming from various places.
So you've got the map here, and the West Azerbaijan province essentially is Iraq, as I said, Turkey, and Armenia as well. So those are the borders of the West Azerbaijan province. Hopefully people can see it. But sorry, do continue.
Yeah, well, Armenia is becoming closer to the West. Again, the Americans and the Israelis have the ability to say, "We're going to give you a certain amount of money. We're going to buy this off." I'm just saying that Iran cannot, and none of us should be sitting back saying, "Oh, Iran beat the Americans." No, they beat them off. And it's a very significant thing that they did. But the game is just beginning. And the Israelis and the Americans are going to find ways to put constant pressure on Iran. Iran needs to get very strong economic and political and military relations with China and Russia. They need to detach their economy as much as possible from the West and from the dollar standard, and tie it into the BRICS and to the Chinese economy. They need to make close relations with China and Russia so that economic pressures on them can be lessened. And they need to be prepared militarily if they're getting infiltrations of troops from Iraq or Armenia. They have to take the fight to them. They have to punish anybody who is sending troops in. Where are these troops coming from in Iraq? Okay, there's got to be bases in Iraq that are bases for these troops. And somebody, and it's not somebody, it's the Americans and the Israelis who are running those bases. And just like they attacked the bases in Kuwait and Bahrain, they have to attack those bases in Iraq. And they have to get the Iraqi militias to do that for them. But the Iraqi government, like the Lebanese government, is controlled by the Americans. So this is a very difficult situation. The Americans and the Israelis have a lot of assets and a lot of tools they can use to put constant pressure on Iran, and they're going to do it. And it's not over. We don't know, what the result of this is going to be. We know Iran has put up a damn good fight and has demonstrated that they're not afraid, but they're going to have serious pressures, military and economic, they're going to have to respond to, and they're going to have to make serious decisions about how proactive they're going to be, not just sitting back saying, oh, we've kept them from destroying us. You keep them from destroying you until they destroy you. What you got to do is prevent them from ever thinking about destroying you, and that's a harder problem.
No doubt. Jim, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. Really appreciate your insight. I know people can find your Substack as the Polemicist on Substack. Also, I believe your X account is also called the Polemicist.
At the Polemicist _.
At the Polemicist _. Where else can people find you?
I have a channel on YouTube and on Rumble. But the best thing is the Substack.
Brilliant. Everyone should definitely follow you on Substack, but thank you so much for taking your time out to join us, and thank you for joining under such short notice. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That was Jim Kavanagh. Do check out his Substack and his X account. I think that was very golden explanation with a lot of passion. Let me give you so guys, make sure you like this video. Very important video. There's a lot of breaking news on that one. I was surprised to see that in terms of what's happened. It says 4 PDKI fighters have been killed. Yeah, there is a significant amount of things happening there, so I'm gonna have to keep apprised of that and then get you the information. That being said, guys, make sure you like this video. I am relying on you to get the likes up. Subscribe to the channel. Have your notifications on. Tomorrow, we're going to be back at 2 p.m. Eastern. Is that right? Yeah, it is 2 p.m. Eastern. And we've got Professor Marandi coming on. Professor Marandi at 2 p.m. Eastern will ask him all the questions about this MOU and the deal and what's happening. So make sure you go. That's an example of why you need to have your notifications on, because that's an interview that isn't in our regular time, but sometimes we work around certain guests to try and get them on, especially if they're in Iran or some of these Middle Eastern countries or South America or East Asia. So check that out. But that being said, much love to every single one of you. Appreciate you guys joining in. Appreciate you guys listening. And I will see you tomorrow at when is